and welcome to episode 66 of Book Writing Tips, Quick Tips for New and Seasoned Authors, and I am your host, Alba Arango. Alrighty then, in today's episode, I want to go over, are you a plotter, are you a pantser, or are you a plantser? And what are some pros and cons to each of these, and which one is the best fit for you? So with no further ado, let's get down to it. Let's talk plotting, pantsing, or plantsing. Alrighty then, today's episode will be in two parts as always. In part one, we'll go over plotting, and I'll give you just a really basic generic idea of what plotting really is, and then we'll talk about some pros and some cons, and you can kind of figure out if maybe that's more like you. Or in part two, we'll go over pantsing, and I'll go over again what pantsing is and then some pros and some cons to that, and see if maybe that is more like you, like your personality and what is good for you. And then we'll end by talking about plantsing, which I had never even heard of until I started doing some research into this. And that's an interesting idea that maybe that would be the best fit for you. But all right, let's get down to it. Let's start with part one, the plotter. Okay, the plotter is someone, and plotting is someone who outlines the entire story before they start actually writing their first draft. Now, that would mean that it's not just a one-page outline, although that could be part of it too, but it's a detailed outline. If you're writing sci-fi or fantasy, I'm talking about you have your entire world already built before you start writing the first page of your first draft. So you already know what the planet is like. You already know what the creatures are like. You already know everything about your characters. You already have this all written down. You have this incredible outline. It might be 30 pages. It might be 40 pages. It might be 25 pages, but you have, every plot line, every story arc, every minor story arc, every subplot. You've got that all outlined perfectly so that when you start writing your first draft, you know exactly where the story is going. And so you put all the creative thinking into creating the outline, and then you write your first draft. Now, while doing this, don't forget you need to have your character arcs already figured out, and you need to have the hero's journey already figured out and incorporated into your outline appropriately as well. Now, if you're writing a trilogy or a limited series, then this might really be a good idea for you. So I think of J.K. Rowling, right? The Harry Potter series. J.K. Rowling is a total plotter. She had all 7 of her books plotted by the time she finished writing her first book. So she's got her first book together and then figured out what was going to be in book 2, book 3, book 4, book 5, book 6, and how she was going to end it before she even finished writing the first Harry Potter. And that is actually, if you're going to be doing a series, something you might want to consider. And I'm going to give you my personal example as well. I have a YA trilogy that I've been working on off and on. It's not my priority, but I have been working on it off and on. And I actually did this. I have a 1-page outline that has the story arc for each book in it for books 1, 2, and 3. And then after that, I went through book 1 and did a very detailed outline. I think it was 22 pages, something like that, before I started writing book 1. And I actually did write book 1 of this, but I've not written books 2 and 3. But I know the main plot lines of book 2 and book 3. And so I could include some foreshadowing or some seeds of things that are going to be coming that aren't really a big part of book 1. So some minor characters, I definitely know what's going to happen to them in books 2 and 3. I know what's going to happen to the 2 main love interests because, it's like a trilogy here, what is it, a love triangle. So I know the main thing. So I can kind of add some stuff in book 1 that I know is going to end up being important in books 2 and 3. And that's kind of if you're writing a trilogy or some kind of limited series series, something you may want to consider before you actually write the book one. Now, some pros. Pros to being a plotter, I mean, really, by the time you finished your first draft, there really are very few, if any, plot holes at all, because you already figured that all out in your outline. So that's actually pretty cool. It also, because you've already come up with the entire story before you started writing, your first draft actually goes pretty fast. You're actually able to write your first draft pretty quickly, and it is probably not as messy as, say, my normal ones are, because I'm quite the pantser. So that's actually a good pro as well. You don't have as much rewriting to do because you've kind of already figured out the plot holes and fixed them in your outline. Now, some cons to this are kind of major, depending on you. Because you've already kind of outlined the story, you don't have quite as much creative freedom as you do when you're a pantser, because you've already written the story in outline form. So then it can be a problem for you personally. It might become almost mechanical. Like you're really just looking at the outline, writing the story, looking at the outline, writing the story, and it might inhibit your creativity, and your story may not flow as organically as you would like it to. Now, again, this is all very, very personal, and that might actually work much better for you. So I would definitely consider, especially if as a personality, you're a planner, you like to plan, you like to have everything planned, you go on vacation and you plan things, then really being a plotter might be the best for you, because it might give you that organization that you crave. So you just got to kind of think of all of this when you're thinking if you're a plotter or a pantser. So let's talk about pantsing. But before we get to part 2 and being a pantser, it's time for the crazy law / writing prompt. And if you are new to the podcast, every week I give you a crazy law. And this is a law that once upon a time was a real law. And your challenge, should you choose to accept it, is to just write a short story based on that law. And this is kind of just a good way to flex your writing muscles or give you a break from your work in progress. So here we go. This week's crazy law. In Sterling, Colorado, cats may not run loose on the streets without a tail light. Now, I just, I'm curious as to how exactly they plan to enforce that. Because I've been around cats and I can't picture myself even trying to put a tail light on a cat. But there you go. There's the law. Have fun with that. All right, but let's get to part 2 and being a pantser. Now, being a pantser, what does that mean? That means you basically have started with the basic idea, and then you just start writing the book. So I will give you a personal example of mine. My last book that I published was The Ruby Diamond. And I literally knew when I started it that I wanted the mystery to take place on a cruise ship. That is literally the only clue I had as to what I was going to write about. I knew they were going to be on a cruise ship. I had no idea what the mystery was going to be. I had no idea what was going to happen, who the antagonist was. No idea. I made it all up on the fly as I go, right by the seat of your pants. That's how it gets its nickname. So you just start with the idea and go. And Stephen King is proud to be a pantser. That is how he writes his books. And I get it, because that is how my mind works as well. And I will tell you, personality wise, my friends will all tell you, my family will all tell you, I am a very spontaneous person. I don't like to plan unless I have to. Sometimes you have to plan. There's no other choice. If you're planning a vacation, you got to do it well ahead of time. But I am definitely a fly by my seat of the pants kind of person. Wake up in the morning and then decide what I'm going to do for the day. That's just who I am. And I love to write like that. I mean, when I did my trilogy, I knew I was going to have more structure. I knew because I was going to want to do things in, books 2 and 3, and I needed to know ahead of time. So I did change it for that. But all my other books, all the J.J. Bennett books, all my Dakota's mysteries have all been by the seat of my pants, because that is how I personally write the best. Now, some pros to writing by the seat of your pants: you have all the creative freedom that you want. Your story can go any direction you want it to go. And you may decide to change the direction because you were writing and you thought it was going to go this way. And instead it went completely sideways and went that way. Sometimes you're completely taken by surprise by what you write. And I will give you an example. When I was writing the first JJ book, I actually wrote, and I will never forget this. I was sitting on the couch in my old house, on my old couch, and I used to do a lot of my writing there until I got like a pinched nerve, and my doctor was like, it's because you sit there and you write like that for hours at a time. Anyways, totally different story. But I remember sitting on my couch, and I remember the mom in the book writing and go, JJ, your father's missing. And I remember I typed those words, and then I sat back and I stared at the computer, and I literally out loud said, where'd he go? And I had no idea. I just knew suddenly he was missing because that's what happened, and I had to figure out where he was going to go. So it gives you so much creative license, and you get to do all kinds of fun stuff. And that is what I personally love when writing books. But that is me. Now, some cons to this, and let me tell you, there are quite a few. You have the bigger potential for writer's block. You really do. And I get stuck sometimes because I don't know where the story's going to go, and I don't know where it can go or where I want it to go. And it can be frustrating. You're more likely to have writer's block if you're a pantser than a plotter. So just kind of keep that in mind. And yes, your first drafts are messy. I know now, if you followed my podcast for any length of time, you know. I have told you the story many times. I had an antagonist one time who started off British and he ended up being French. And I literally in the middle of the book, I changed my mind about who he was going to be. So you have to go back and fix all of that when you're a pantser, when you finish that first draft. But you know what? It's fun. I enjoy the whole fixing it all up stuff. That's fun for me. But that is not everyone's piece of cake. That is not everyone's joy. All right. People who are very well organized, these are things that really frustrate them. So they are probably better off being a plotter than a pantser. And you got to watch out for plot holes because you didn't think it through. So you got to come back. And that's what I literally have been doing this week, is fixing a couple of plot holes that I noticed as I was going through my latest book. Like, well, that, I wrote that, but I never talked about it again. So I may have to address that now. And I did. Had to fix a couple of pretty big plot holes there. Now, let's talk about, what if you don't know? I mean, I like the idea of having an outline, but I like the idea of being creative, and I don't really know which one is better for me. Well, let me tell you, there is one other option, and that is what they call a plantser. And I really had never heard that term before, but it is literally a hybrid of the two. And I think a lot of authors fall into this category. And I remember probably like 4 or 5 years ago, I had asked Anthony Horowitz, who is a popular British author. I asked him, are you a plotter or a pantser? And at first he was like, I don't know what that means. So I had to explain very quickly what a plotter is and what a pantser is. And he's like, oh, okay, I get it. He's like, I think I'm both. He's like, because I like having an outline, but I also like to just write. And that, I think, is what a lot of authors do anymore, is they have a general outline, maybe 1 page or maybe 2 pages, the major plot lines, right? Maybe even little subplots, or maybe they throw those in later, but that's it. And then the rest of it, they just kind of write by the seat of their pants. So they have an idea where the story is going because they know where they need to get to the next plot line. They just have no idea how they're going to get from A to B. And that's where kind of the hybrid comes in, because then the pantsing comes in and then they just kind of figure it out on the fly. So there you go. All of these are great. It all just depends on your personality. Which one do you think is best for you? And if you've already written a couple books, maybe try the other way. Try writing an outline if you've done the pantsing things for the past couple books. Or if you've done the plotting things, maybe give it a go. Try the pantsing where you just try that out. But some of you already know. You already know by your personality exactly where you fall, and you should probably stick to that because that's probably what's best for you. But for the rest of you who aren't sure, planting might just be the one, come up with the general idea, some general plot lines, and then just kind of see how it goes. But whichever you decide, it needs to be something that you are comfortable with. Just because J.K. Rowling is a plotter doesn't mean you need to be a plotter. Just because Stephen King is a pantser doesn't mean you need to be a pantser. You need to figure out what is best for you, and then, follow your gut. because that's probably going to take you down the right path. All right, that's it for this week. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope I gave you a little bit of insight in plotting, pantsing, and maybe some ideas of which one you may be. I drop a new episode every Wednesday. So until next week, stay safe. Don't forget to subscribe to my podcast, and I will see you all next week.